Welcome to the Most Valuable Lessons Book Discussion Podcast. The book discussion topic for today is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey.
All right, so we're diving into Stephen Covey's 7 Habits,
Yeah,
which is like this legendary self-help book.
it is.
But I have to say, it can be a little dense at times.
Yeah.
So we're going to pull out like the juiciest bits
Okay.
and, more importantly, figure out how to actually use them.
I think that's what Covey intended. He wasn't just offering sort of like productivity hacks,
Right.
but really a philosophy for a more fulfilling life.
Oh, I like that. A philosophy for a more fulfilling life.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Habit 1, be proactive.
Okay.
So this feels like it about more than just, making to-do lists, right?
Absolutely. It all starts with mindset.
Yeah.
Imagine two people who both get laid off from their jobs.
Okay.
One blames the company, wallows in negativity.
Mm-hmm.
The other uses the situation to learn new skills, lands even a better job because of it.
Wow.
So same situation, totally different outcomes.
Okay, so it's like choosing how you respond to those curveballs that life throws at you.
Yeah, Covey would say that second person is tapping into their circle of influence.
Okay,
You can't control getting laid off, but you can control how you respond,
right.
what you learn from it and what you do next, and that's where your power lies.
That actually is incredibly empowering,
Right.
especially if you're feeling stuck in a rut.
Yeah.
So then how do we apply that same proactivity to, say, our goals?
Mm-hmm.
And that brings us to habit 2. Begin with the end in mind.
Yeah, this one is interesting because Covey actually uses a mental exercise.
Okay.
That can be a little jarring, but it's incredibly effective.
Right.
He asks you to imagine your own funeral.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So what are people saying about you? What do you want to be remembered for?
Wow. Okay, that definitely makes you think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, and by connecting with that bigger picture, your daily choices can become much clearer.
Okay.
So instead of asking yourself, should I do X, you start asking, does doing X align with the person I want to be remembered as?
So it's almost like having that clear picture of the end can help you make decisions in the now.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to keep that funeral exercise in mind as we move into habit 3. Put first things first,
Okay.
which is that whole time management matrix.
Yes.
It's easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day and kind of lose sight of the bigger picture.
Absolutely. And Covey understood that. Think about it this way.
Okay?
Have you ever felt like you were constantly busy, putting out fires, but not making any real progress on the things that truly mattered?
Oh, yes. Like running on a treadmill, but you're not really going anywhere.
Exactly. Covey would say you're stuck in quadrant 1, consumed by urgency.
Okay.
But long-term success, those things that you want to be remembered for,
Yeah.
often live in quadrant 2, things that are important but not urgent.
Right.
Things like building strong relationships, planning for the future.
Right.
Or, as we'll talk about later, sharpening the saw, which is all about self-renewal.
Ooh, okay. I like that. So it sounds like quadrant 2 is where you create the space to actually live out those values
Exactly.
that we were talking about in the funeral exercise.
Exactly. It's about making time for what truly matters, even when it feels like there's no time to spare.
Wow. Okay. I'm starting to see how all of these habits connect with each other.
Yeah.
All right. On to habit 4. Think win-win.
Okay.
Now, this one seems pretty straightforward in theory,
Yeah.
but I have a feeling it's not always so easy to put into practice.
You're right. It sounds simple, but think about this. How often do you approach situations with kind of a win-lose mentality, maybe without even realizing it?
Probably more often than I'd like to admit.
Right. Covey tells this story about a company president who tried to motivate his employees
Okay.
by offering a trip to Bermuda to the highest performer.
Oh, I'm already getting bad vibes about this.
It backfired spectacularly because instead of working together,
Yeah.
everyone became hyper-competitive, they were hoarding information, they were undermining each other, all for a trip to Bermuda.
Wow. Talk about a toxic work environment.
Right?
So I guess what seems like a win for one person
Yeah.
can actually create a lose
Yeah.
for everyone in the long run.
Exactly. And Covey's point is that it doesn't have to be that way.
Okay.
So think about a time you collaborated with someone and you both benefited.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you learned something new or you expanded your network.
Yeah.
Or even just had fun working together. I mean, that's a win-win.
Oh, I love that. It's a good reminder that collaboration and looking for those mutually beneficial solutions
Mm-hmm.
can be so much more fulfilling personally and professionally.
Absolutely. And that actually leads perfectly into habit 5. Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Which I have a feeling is crucial for creating those win-win situations.
It is, and Covey actually uses kind of a humorous but insightful example to illustrate this habit.
Okay.
So imagine you're a patient, you're struggling with your vision.
Okay.
You go to the ophthalmologist, you describe your symptoms, but instead of listening to you and diagnosing the problem, the doctor just throws a pair of glasses at you
Okay.
and says, "Here, these worked for me, try harder."
Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to that feeling of being misunderstood.
Yeah.
It's almost comical, but also incredibly frustrating.
It happens all the time, right, in our interactions with others.
It does.
We're so busy trying to get our own point across that we don't take the time to truly listen
Yeah.
and understand where the other person is coming from.
So how do we break that habit? How do we become better listeners,
Mm.
especially, in the heat of the moment?
Covey would say it starts with empathy,
Okay.
which is more than just passively listening. It's about trying to see the world through the other person's eyes, understanding their emotions,
Right.
and really grasping their perspective, even if you don't agree with it.
Yeah, that's a really powerful concept.
Yeah.
And it makes me think about how differently that doctor's appointment would have gone
Yeah.
if he had just taken the time to really listen to his patient.
Exactly. It's in that space of true understanding that trust and connection are built.
Right.
And that's essential not only for resolving conflicts, but also for building, strong, healthy relationships.
Absolutely. It makes me think of that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's good.
And I think seeking to understand is such a powerful way to show that you care.
Absolutely. And speaking of understanding, let's talk about how important it is to appreciate our own strengths and those of others, which brings us to habit 6, synergize.
Now, this one always makes me think of that incredible footage of geese flying in a V formation.
It's a perfect example of synergy in action.
It is.
They're not just flying in a V because it looks cool. They've
Ah.
discovered that by flying in this formation, they can actually reduce wind resistance, allowing them to fly farther and expend less energy.
It's like nature's way of demonstrating teamwork at its finest.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we can achieve so much more when we work together, leveraging our unique strengths and perspectives. And that's true whether we're talking about geese flying south for the winter
Right.
or humans trying to solve complex problems.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what we could accomplish if we embrace that kind of synergy more often.
It is an exciting thought, isn't it?
It is.
And it brings to mind one of the ultimate examples of synergy, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak.
Oh, yeah. The dynamic duo who revolutionized the tech world.
Exactly. So Wozniak, the brilliant engineer, and Jobs, the visionary marketer,
Right.
their collaboration created something truly extraordinary
They did.
that neither one of them could have achieved on their own.
It really highlights the power of recognizing our own strengths and then finding partners who complement our skill set.
Exactly. And that's something for you to consider as well.
Okay.
What are your unique strengths?
Yeah.
What are you passionate about?
Yeah.
And who are the people in your life who complement your skills and can help you achieve even greater things?
Those are fantastic questions.
Mm.
And on that note of self-reflection, let's move on to habit 7. Sharpen the saw.
Yes, the habit that's all about self-renewal
Yes.
and reminds us that we can't pour from an empty cup.
Okay, before you explain, this one always makes me chuckle.
Okay.
Because I always picture that guy who's so busy sawing away at a tree that he doesn't have time to stop and sharpen his saw.
Right.
It's just this classic image for me.
It's a classic example of how we often get so caught up in the busyness of life
Yes.
that we neglect the very things that would make us more effective,
Right.
more focused, and frankly, happier in the long run.
It's so easy to fall into that trap, though. We think, I'm too busy to take a break.
Yeah.
Or, I'll relax once this project is done.
Yeah.
But then that project leads to another project and then another project, and before you know it, you're running on fumes.
You're describing burnout,
Yeah.
and it's something that Covey wanted to help people avoid.
Yeah.
He understood that taking time for self-renewal isn't selfish. It's essential for long-term productivity and fulfillment.
So what exactly does sharpening the saw look like?
Well, it's about taking care of yourself
Okay.
in all areas of your life, physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual.
Okay.
So that could be anything from exercising and eating well to meditating or spending time in nature.
Yeah.
It could also mean nurturing your relationships, learning a new skill,
Right.
or simply taking some time for quiet reflection.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because it connects back to quadrant 2 thinking, right?
Yes.
It's about prioritizing those important but not urgent activities
Exactly.
that ultimately make us more effective in all areas of our lives.
You're absolutely right. It's about making a conscious choice to prioritize your well-being,
Right.
even when life gets hectic.
Yeah.
And remember, it doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming.
Okay.
Even small acts of self-care can make a big difference.
I love that small steps consistently applied can lead to big changes. And speaking of big changes, I think it's important to acknowledge that these 7 habits aren't just about personal effectiveness.
Right.
They also have the power to transform our relationships with others.
Absolutely. In fact, Covey would argue that the private victory always precedes the public victory,
Oh, interesting.
meaning you can't truly be effective in your interactions with others until you've developed a strong sense of self-awareness, integrity, and the ability to manage your own emotions and behaviors.
So habits 1 through 3, those personal victories, lay the foundation for the more interpersonal habits that come later.
Exactly. You can't truly think win-win if you haven't first mastered the ability to understand the other person's perspective.
Right.
And you can't build synergistic relationships if you're not willing to invest in your own growth and development.
Yeah, it all comes back to that interconnectedness of these 7 habits.
It does.
They work together as a system to create positive change, both internally and externally.
Precisely. And as you start integrating these habits into your life, it's important to remember that it's not about being perfect. It's about progress.
Right.
There will be times when you fall back into old patterns,
Oh, yeah.
when you get caught up in the busyness of life.
Absolutely.
And that's okay. The key is to approach the process with self-compassion
Okay.
and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
That's such an important reminder.
Yeah.
It's not about beating ourselves up when we inevitably make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
It's about learning from those experiences and then making a conscious effort to do better next time.
Exactly.
And it makes me wonder, as we approach, kind of the end of our deep dive into the 7 habits,
Mm-hmm.
is there one key takeaway that you hope people walk away with?
You know, for me, it would be the power of proactivity and taking ownership of our life.
Right.
Because when it comes down to it, we all have the ability to choose how we respond to the challenges and opportunities that come our way.
Right.
We can choose to be reactive and let our circumstances control us, or we can choose to be proactive and create the life we want, one habit at a time.
That's such an empowering message.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the heart of what Covey was trying to teach.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's important to acknowledge that putting these habits into practice can be challenging,
Yeah.
especially if we're trying to tackle them all at once.
It can be a lot.
So if you had to pick just one habit to focus on this week, where would you suggest people start?
That's a great question. And while all of the habits are interconnected and build upon each other, if I had to choose just one, I would say start with seek first to understand.
Oh, interesting. Why that one? What makes it such a powerful starting point?
Because I think it's the key to unlocking so many other areas of our lives.
Okay.
It strengthens our relationships, improves our communication, helps us navigate conflict more effectively.
Right.
And plus, in a world that often feels increasingly polarized and divided, that ability to truly understand and empathize with others seems more vital than ever.
That's a powerful argument. And it makes me think back to that quote by Dr. Stephen R. Covey himself,
Mm-hmm.
where he said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply.
It's so true.
And choosing to listen with the intent to understand,
Yeah.
to truly empathize with another person's perspective, even if we don't agree with it.
Yeah,
That's where the real magic happens.
absolutely. And that's something for all of us to reflect on.
Mm-hmm.
How often do we listen with the intent to understand versus the intent to reply?
Yeah.
It's a subtle shift in mindset, but it can have a profound impact on our relationships and our ability to connect with others on a deeper level.
I completely agree, and I think it's a perfect note to end on as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into the 7 habits for today.
Sounds good to me.
Okay, so we're back, and I have to say, this whole idea of sharpening the saw has really got me thinking
Oh, yeah.
about how often I put off self-care because I'm just too busy.
It's so easy to do, right?
It is. It's like we're almost conditioned to prioritize busyness over well-being these days.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a common trap, especially in our fast-paced world. But here's the thing to remember.
Okay.
When you consistently invest in yourself, it's not just about, avoiding burnout.
Right.
It's about increasing your capacity for everything,
Okay.
for handling challenges, being more creative, showing up as your best self in all areas of life.
So it's not just about trying to, squeeze more out of an already depleted battery.
Yeah,
It's like upgrading to a more powerful energy source altogether.
exactly. Think of it like this.
Okay.
Have you ever noticed that when you're feeling stressed and depleted, it's harder to focus?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Harder to come up with new ideas?
Hmm.
To be patient with others?
Oh, 100%. It's like my brain goes into survival mode.
Yes.
And everything feels like 10 times harder.
Exactly. But when you prioritize your well-being,
Okay.
whether that's through exercise, good nutrition, getting enough sleep, or even just taking some quiet time for yourself,
Right.
you're essentially giving your mind and body the resources they need to function at their best.
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button
Yeah,
and coming back refreshed and re-energized.
exactly.
So how can we be more intentional about incorporating, sharpening the saw into our daily lives? Because let's be real, it's easy to say, I'm going to take better care of myself.
Yeah.
But actually doing it consistently
Right.
is a whole other story.
You're right. It takes effort. But here's a suggestion.
Okay?
Instead of thinking of it as one more thing on your to-do list,
Yeah.
try weaving it into your existing routines. For example, could you start your day with 10 minutes of meditation or stretching? Could you listen to a podcast or audiobook you've been wanting to check out while you're commuting or doing chores?
Yeah.
Could you swap out social media, scrolling for a walk in nature a couple of times a week?
Those are all such good ideas.
It's about,
And it's about finding those little pockets of time throughout the day
exactly.
and using them to recharge and invest in ourselves.
Right.
And it makes me think back to habit 3, put first things first, and prioritizing those quadrant 2 activities
Yeah.
that are important, but not always urgent.
Absolutely.
Seems like sharpening the saw is like a perfect example of a quadrant 2 activity that often gets pushed aside.
You are absolutely right. It's about making a conscious choice to prioritize your well-being, even when life gets hectic.
Yes.
And remember, it doesn't have to be complicated or time-consuming.
Hmm.
Even small acts of self-care can make a big difference.
I love that small steps consistently applied can lead to big changes.
For sure.
And speaking of big changes, I think it's important to acknowledge that these 7 habits aren't just about personal effectiveness.
Right.
They also have the power to transform our relationships with others.
Absolutely. In fact, Covey would argue that the private victory always precedes the public victory,
Oh, I like that.
meaning
Yeah,
you
explain
can't truly be effective in your interactions with others until you've developed a strong sense of self-awareness,
Okay.
integrity, and the ability to manage your own emotions and behaviors.
So habits 1 through 3, those personal victories, lay the foundation for the more interpersonal habits that come later.
Exactly. You can't truly think win-win if you haven't first mastered the ability to understand the other person's perspective.
Right.
And you can't build synergistic relationships if you're not willing to invest in your own growth and development.
Right. It all comes back to that interconnectedness
That's
of
so
these 7
simple.
habits.
Yeah, and as you start integrating these habits into your life, it's important to remember that it's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about progress.
Okay.
There will be times when you fall back into old patterns.
Oh, for sure.
When you get caught up in the busyness of life.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's okay.
Right.
The key is to approach the process with self-compassion and a willingness to keep learning and growing.
That's such an important reminder.
It is.
It's not about, beating ourselves up.
Yeah,
When we inevitably make mistakes, it's about learning from those experiences
absolutely.
and making a conscious effort to do better next time.
I love that.
And it makes me wonder, as we kind of approach the end of our deep dive into the 7 habits,
Yeah.
if there's one key takeaway that you hope people walk away with.
Yeah, for me, it would be the power of proactivity and taking ownership of our lives.
Okay.
Because when it comes down to it, we all have the ability to choose how we respond to the challenges and opportunities that come our way.
Right.
We can choose to be reactive and let our circumstances control us, or we can choose to be proactive and create the life we want, one habit at a time.
That's such an empowering message.
Yeah.
And it really gets to the heart, I think, of what Covey was trying to teach. But I also think it's important to acknowledge that putting these habits into practice can be challenging,
It is.
especially if we're trying to tackle them all at once.
Right. It can be a lot.
So if you had to pick just one habit to focus on this week,
Okay.
where would you suggest people start?
That's a great question. And while all of the habits are interconnected and build upon each other, if I had to choose just one, I would say start with seek first to understand.
Oh, interesting. Why that one? What makes it such a powerful starting point?
Because I think it's the key to unlocking so many other areas of our lives.
Okay.
It strengthens our relationships, it improves our communication, it helps us navigate conflict more effectively. And plus, in a world that often feels increasingly polarized and divided, that ability to truly understand and empathize with others seems more vital than ever.
That's a really powerful argument. And it makes me think back to that quote by Dr. Stephen R. Covey himself,
Oh, yeah.
where he said, most people do not listen with the intent to understand.
Okay.
They listen with the intent to reply.
So true.
And choosing to listen with the intent to understand, to truly empathize with another person's perspective, even if we don't agree with it,
Yeah.
that's where the real magic happens.
Absolutely. And that's something for all of us to reflect on. How often do we listen with the intent to understand versus the intent to reply? It's a subtle shift in mindset, but it can have a profound impact on our relationships and our ability to connect with others on a deeper level.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And I think it's a perfect note to end on as we wrap up our deep dive into the 7 habits.
Awesome.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Stephen Covey's 7 habits,
Yeah.
I'm curious, for someone listening who's like, all right, I want to apply this seek first to understand.
Right.
What's like one tangible thing they can do
Yeah.
to start putting that into practice?
Well, one thing you can try is the next time you're in a conversation, especially one where you might disagree with the other person,
Okay.
really try to understand their point of view before jumping in with your own. So you can ask clarifying questions.
Yeah.
You can reflect back what you're hearing them say
Right.
and really just try to put yourself in their shoes.
Yeah. And I think it's also easy to forget about like our nonverbal cues too.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, are we making eye contact? Are we really present in that moment?
Yeah, we just waiting to jump in.
Exactly. Or are we like on our phones or something?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, those nonverbal cues speak volumes.
They do.
And I think being mindful of that can make a big difference as well.
And you know what's interesting? Even beyond individual interactions, that principle of seek first to understand can apply to like bigger issues in the world around us.
So that's interesting. How so?
Well, we live in a world, right, with so much information coming at us from all directions.
It's overwhelming.
And it's very easy to get caught up in our own echo chambers, surrounded by people who share our same beliefs and perspectives.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think if we really want to make progress on, these complex issues, whether it's, political polarization or social injustice,
Right.
it starts with understanding.
So it's not just about surrounding ourselves with people who agree with us all the time.
Exactly.
It's about being willing to listen to and learn from people who might have different views.
Absolutely. And approaching those conversations with curiosity, not judgment. Recognizing that everybody has a story. Everybody have experiences that have shaped their worldview.
Yeah.
And it's through understanding those stories that we can really begin to bridge divides and find common ground.
It's so true. That's beautifully said. And I think it speaks to the power of Covey's work.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just about being more effective individuals. It's about creating a more understanding and compassionate world.
Exactly.
And it all starts with that one step of
Yeah.
seeking first to understand.
Absolutely.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive, I hope you take away that these 7 habits aren't just some, like,
Right.
set of rules to follow.
No.
It's really a framework for living a more fulfilling and meaningful life.
I love that.
And it's about being proactive,
Yeah.
defining your goals, prioritizing what matters most,
Yeah.
building strong relationships,
Absolutely.
and, just becoming the best version of yourself,
I love it.
both personally and in your relationships with others.
Beautifully said.
So as you go about your week, I encourage you to think about these habits
Yeah.
and consider which one really resonates most strongly with you. And what's one small step that you can take today to start putting it into action.
It doesn't have to be anything big, just one small step.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because those small changes consistently applied
Yes.
can lead to extraordinary results.
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to revisit these habits again and again.
Yeah.
Life is a journey, not a destination.
That's so true.
And there's always something new to learn and discover within Covey's, timeless wisdom.
Perfectly said. Until next time,
Yeah.
keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving to live a life that is both effective and meaningful.
I love it. See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for watching. Please help to like and subscribe to our channel to get notifications for future videos from our channel.